calling all love story lovers. Today's episode will melt your heart and maybe even bring a tear to your eye. Ready? Let's begin. Asterisk. When Camila Rodriguez hurls a stone at billionaire Maximilliano Sterling's $200,000 Lamborghini, she expects consequences. What she doesn't expect is a marriage proposal from her father that changes both their lives forever. Asterisk. Let's see how a story Beganoni no one ever imagined. Asterisk. The stone left Camila Rodriguez's hand before her conscience could stop it. Time slowed. As the jagged piece of concrete sailed through the humid New York air, rotating lazily against the backdrop of Fifth Avenue's towering glass monuments to capitalism, she watched with equal parts horror and satisfaction as it found its target with surgical precision. The Lamborghini Aventador's windshield exploded into 1,000 crystalline fragments, each piece catching the afternoon sunlight like scattered diamonds. The sleek yellow beast lurched violently to the right, its tires screaming against asphalt as pedestrians dove for safety behind parked cars and into doorways. "You damn idiots." The voice that emerged from the vehicle carried the sharp edge of money and privilege. Maximilliano Sterling unfolded himself from the driver's seat like a predator emerging from its den, 6 feet of tailored perfection now decorated with safety glass. His $3,000 Armani suit bore the battle scars of her rebellion, and his blue eyes blazed with the kind of fury that could level city blocks. Camila clutched her protest sign tighter, the cardboard edges cutting into her palms. "Sterling destroys our community," read the hand-painted letters. Each word a declaration of war against the man now scanning the crowd like a hawk searching for prey. His finger found her across the chaos of honking cars and shouting pedestrians. "You threw that stone at my car." She dropped the sign and crossed her arms, chin raised in defiance that had been bred into her bones through generations of Rodriguez women who refused to bow. "So what if I did? Your project is going to demolish the community center where my grandmother has been teaching children for 20 years. Maximilliano Sterling moved through traffic like Moses parting the Red Sea, his presence commanding enough to make yellow cabs swerve and delivery trucks brake. Horns blared a symphony of urban rage, but he walked as if he owned every inch of concrete beneath his Italian leather shoes. Do you have any idea how much it costs to fix this windshield? Less than it costs to destroy an entire community? Camila planted her feet like a warrior preparing for siege, brown eyes flashing with the same fire that had driven her to throw the stone in the first place. They stood face to face on the sidewalk, surrounded by a growing crowd of onlookers, who sensed drama better than bloodhound-scented prey. Phone cameras emerged like flowers after rain, recording what would surely become tomorrow's viral sensation. Max Sterling, 29, and heir to an empire built on other people's demolished dreams, had never encountered anyone who dared meet his gaze with such naked defiance. This woman smelled like cinnamon and rebellion, with paint-stained fingers, and hair that refused to stay contained in its ponytail. Chose everything his world had trained him to dismiss, yet she held his attention like gravity. "Listen here, young lady. My name is Camila Rodriguez." "Not young lady. Listen here, Camila Rodriguez." He spoke her name like a curse word, each syllable dripping with condescension. "It just destroyed private property. I'm going to sue you." Until Maximilliano Sterling. The voice cut through their standoff like a blade through silk. Both combatants turned to see Ricardo Rodriguez approaching, his weathered face flushed with anger and something else that looked dangerously like amusement. At 50, the man carried himself with the confident stride of someone who had built his own empire brick by brick, competing directly with Sterling Corp for every lucrative contract in the city. Camila ran to his side, suddenly looking younger than her 26 years. "So you're his daughter." Max's laugh held no humor. "That explains a lot." "What explains a lot is you being an arrogant man who thinks he can buy everything and everyone." Ricardo stepped forward, his broad shoulders squaring for battle. "Your daughter destroyed my car. I'd pay for her to do it again." The crowd pressed closer, sensing blood in the water. Camera flashes strobed like lightning, and Max could already see tomorrow's headlines dancing in his mind. His lawyer would have a coronary. His board would demand explanations. and his carefully cultivated image would crumble into tabloid fodder. Very well. Adjusted his tie with the practiced calm of a man accustomed to wielding power like a surgeon's scalpel. He pulled out his phone, finger hovering over a contact that could change lives with a single call. If that's how you want to play this, James, it's me. I want you to speed up the demolition of the community center on 47th Street. Tomorrow? No, today. Camila's face went pale as fresh snow. You can't do that. Just watch. Max's smile could have frozen hell itself. That's when Ricardo Rodriguez did something completely unexpected. He threw back his head and laughed. A sound so genuine and unguarded that even the traffic seemed too quiet in response. You know what, Sterling? You remind me of my arrogant young days. He wiped his eyes, still chuckling at some private joke. I have a proposal for you. One that can solve our problems once and for all. Curiosity warring. With anger in his chest, I'm listening. Ricardo's eyes gleamed with the dangerous light of a man who had just discovered checkmate in 3 moves. A marriage. The word hung in the air like smoke from a discharged gun. Around them, the city's perpetual symphony of car horns and construction noise faded to a whisper, as if New York itself was holding its breath. A marriage? Camila and Max spoke in perfect, horrified unison. You marry my daughter, I stop competing for contracts in the South Zone, and you cancel the community center demolition. Ricardo's voice carried the matter-of-fact tone of a man discussing the weather rather than bartering his daughter's future. The silence that followed was so profound that the distant rumble of a subway train 3 blocks away sounded like thunder. Max stared at Camila, who looked as if she had swallowed a live fish, then back at Ricardo, who wore the satisfied expression of a chess master who had just announced checkmate. You're insane, Max whispered, crazy like a fox. Do you accept or not? Camila finally found her voice, though it emerged as a strangled croak. Dad, you can't trade me like I'm cattle. I'm not trading anyone, Mia. I'm offering a practical solution. Ricardo's use of the Spanish endearment did nothing to soften the steel in his voice. This man needs to learn what real life looks like beyond his ivory tower. You need to understand how power works in this city, and I need to protect our community. Max ran his hand through his perfectly styled black hair, the gesture leaving dark strands sticking up at odd angles. He had awakened that morning as a rich, arrogant bachelor with the world at his feet. Now he stood on a sidewalk, covered in safety glass, being offered an arranged marriage by his biggest business rival, because a stone had found his windshield. And if I accept, he said slowly, each word carefully measured, how long would this arrangement last? 1 year. Ricardo's answer came without hesitation. It's long enough for both of you to learn some important lessons about life. Dad, you cannot be serious deal. The word left Max's mouth before his brain could process the insanity of what he was agreeing to. Camila whirled on him, her eyes blazing with fury that made her earlier defiance look like a gentle breeze. Maximilliano Sterling, you cannot accept a marriage with me without asking my opinion? Max stepped closer, drawn by something he couldn't name. In the chaos of shattered glass and shouting crowds, she remained planted like a tree in a hurricane, unshakable and furious, and more real than anything in his carefully curated world. Look at me. His voice dropped to a register that cut through the noise around them, commanding her attention with an authority that surprised them both. You will be my wife, Camila Rodriguez. And I guarantee it will be the most interesting year of your life. The words landed between them like a challenge thrown down in a medieval court. Camila felt the world tilt on its axis, the familiar streets of her neighborhood suddenly foreign and threatening. The most arrogant man in New York had just agreed to marry her because of a stone she had thrown at his car. From the dangerous gleam in those blue eyes, she suspected she had just made either the biggest mistake or the best decision of her life. See you at the altar, darling. Max's smile could have powered half of Manhattan as he adjusted his destroyed suit jacket and walked back toward his shattered Lamborghini. Each step echoed with the confidence of a man who had just won a game whose rules only he understood. Camila stood frozen on the sidewalk, her jaw hanging open like a broken gate. while Ricardo clapped his hands together with the satisfaction of a man who had just solved world hunger. Well, he said to his shell-shocked daughter, "Looks like you're going to need a wedding dress." 3 days later, Camila sat in her tiny Brooklyn apartment, staring at the legal documents spread across her coffee table like evidence of a crime she couldn't remember committing. The marriage contract was a masterpiece of legal precision. Every clause and subcondition typed in the kind of small print that lawyers use to hide the devil in the details. The apartment felt smaller than usual, walls pressing in with the weight of her decision. Afternoon sunlight streamed through windows that needed washing, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny spirits in the stale air. Her grandmother's hand-painted pottery lined the shelves, each piece a reminder of the community center that had shaped her entire world. Her phone buzzed with the 5th call from her best friend Maria that morning. She let it go to voicemail, unable to face another conversation about how she had lost her mind. The news had already hit the gossip blogs, complete with grainy cell phone photos of the windshield. Incident and speculation about whether this was a publicity stunt or genuine insanity. A sharp knock at the door made her jump, scattering legal papers across the worn hardwood floor. Through the peephole, she saw a delivery man holding a garment bag that looked expensive enough to feed her neighborhood for a month. Camila Rodriguez. Delivery from Vera Wang. She signed for the package with trembling fingers, knowing without opening it that her life had just crossed another point of no return. Inside the pristine white bag hung a wedding dress that belonged in fairy tales, all silk and pearl beading. That caught the light like captured starfire. A note fell from the folds of fabric, written in handwriting so perfect it could have been printed. "For my bride, tomorrow at noon, don't disappoint me. Tomorrow." The wedding was tomorrow, and she still had no idea why she had agreed to this madness. Perhaps it was the way Max had looked at her on that sidewalk, as if seeing something in her that she didn't even know existed. Perhaps it was the thought of her grandmother's students losing their safe haven to another luxury development. Or perhaps she was simply tired of watching the world get smaller and meaner while she stood on the sidelines throwing stones at windshields. Her reflection in the bedroom mirror showed a woman on the edge of either triumph or disaster. Circles shadowed her eyes, and her usually wild hair hung limp around her shoulders. She looked like someone who had sold her soul and wasn't sure if she had gotten a fair price. The dress fit perfectly, which somehow made everything worse. Max Sterling was the kind of man who got a woman's measurements without asking, who moved through the world with such confidence that reality bent to accommodate his desires. Tomorrow, she would stand beside him in front of a judge and promise to honor and cherish a man she had known for exactly 72 hours. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory, words spoken in accented English during those long afternoons in the community center kitchen. "Mia, sometimes we must become the storm to change the weather." Perhaps that's what this was. It's not surrender, but strategy. She would marry Maximilliano Sterling, save her community, and figure out how to survive a year with a man who treated the world like his personal chessboard. The wedding dress rustled like whispered secrets as she hung it carefully in her closet. Tomorrow, she would become Mrs. Sterling. Tonight, she would try to remember who Camila Rodriguez used to be. The courthouse wedding took exactly 17 minutes, which seemed fitting for a marriage built on shattered glass and bruised pride. Judge Morrison, a weathered woman who had seen every variety of human foolishness pass through her chambers, raised an eyebrow at the unusual couple but asked no questions beyond the legally required ones. Camila stood beside Max in the sterile room that smelled of disinfectant and broken dreams. Her grandmother's rosary wrapped around her bouquet of white roses. The Vera Wang dress transformed her into someone she barely recognized, a woman who belonged in Max's world of marble lobbies and champagne brunches. Max had arrived in a new Lamborghini, this one black as midnight and just as unforgiving. His charcoal suit was perfectly pressed, his tie knotted with mathematical precision. But Camila noticed the slight tremor in his hands as he slipped the platinum band onto her finger. "You may kiss the bride," Judge Morrison announced, with the enthusiasm of someone reading a grocery list. The kiss lasted 3 seconds, tasted like coffee and uncertainty, and sealed a bargain that neither of them fully understood. Broke apart, Max's blue eyes held something that might have been surprise. as if he hadn't expected her lips to be soft or her hands to steady his trembling ones. Ricardo witnessed the ceremony with tears in his eyes, though whether they were of joy or grief remained unclear. Maria, Camila's best friend and maid of honor, watched with the expression of someone attending a funeral for the living. The reception was held at La Bernardine, where Max had reserved the private dining room without consulting his new wife. Camila sat at the head table, picking at food that probably cost more than her monthly rent, while Max worked the room with the practiced ease of a politician. Business associates congratulated him on his acquisition, as if she were a particularly attractive piece of real estate. "How are you holding up, Mrs. Sterling?" The voice belonged to James Morrison, Max's attorney and right-hand man. He was the kind of person who wore expensive suits to disguise a cheap soul, all sharp smiles and calculating eyes. "It's still Rodriguez," Camila replied, setting down her fork with more force than necessary. "Camila Rodriguez Sterling, of course. My apologies." His smile never wavered. "I trust you understand the terms of your arrangement. The prenup is quite explicit about expectations." "I'm not an idiot, Mr. Morrison. No, I don't imagine you are, but you are out of your depth. This world has rules you don't understand, consequences you can't foresee. Max is offering you a glimpse into paradise, but paradise has a price." Before Camila could respond, a warm hand settled on her shoulder. Max had materialized beside her chair, with the silence of expensive leather shoes on marble. "Oh, James, I believe. My wife would prefer to enjoy our reception without your particular brand of wisdom." The dismissal was gentle but absolute. James retreated with the practiced grace of a man accustomed to being managed by his more powerful clients. Max slid into the chair beside Camila, close enough for her to catch his scent of cedar and something darker she couldn't identify. "He's charming," she said. "He's effective. There's a difference." Max lifted his champagne flute, studying the golden bubbles as if they held secrets. "Are you regretting this already? Are you?" "No, never regret business decisions. This is just another negotiation, another deal to be managed. Is that what I am? A business decision?" Max turned to face her fully, and for a moment the mask of polished perfection slipped. "I don't know what you are, Camila Rodriguez Sterling. That's what makes you dangerous." The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. She had expected arrogance, condescension, the casual cruelty of a man who viewed people as assets to be acquired. Instead, she heard something that sounded almost like vulnerability. "You should go," he said, rising from his chair. "It's getting late, and tomorrow is a school day." "School day? Your education in how to be Mrs. Sterling begins tomorrow, 8 a.m. sharp." The penthouse apartment on Central Park West was everything Camila had expected, and nothing she was prepared for. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city that made her feel like a goddess surveying her domain. The furniture was museum quality, the art probably worth more than her childhood home, and the silence so profound it felt oppressive. "The master bedroom is upstairs," Max said, loosening his tie as he surveyed his domain. "The guest rooms are on this floor. Choose whichever. You prefer where will you sleep?" "I have a home office with a couch. I often work late." He paused, studying her face with the intensity of a man trying to solve a particularly complex equation. "Unless you had other expectations?" The question hung between them like a bridge neither was ready to cross. Camila felt heat rise in her cheeks, partly from embarrassment and partly from something else she didn't want to examine too closely. "I didn't know what to expect," she admitted. "Good. Expectations are disappointing. Surprises are interesting." He disappeared into his office, leaving Camila alone in a living room that could have housed her entire apartment building. She chose a guest room that faced east, thinking she would need the morning sun to remind her that the world beyond these walls still existed. The bed was enormous, covered in sheets with a thread count higher than most people's salaries. Hung the wedding dress carefully in a closet the size of her former bedroom. Then stood before the mirror and borrowed silk pajamas that probably cost more than her car. Mrs. Sterling looked back at her, a stranger wearing her face. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new rules to learn, new battles to fight. But tonight, in the silence of her golden cage, Camila Rodriguez Sterling tried to remember why she had thrown that stone in the first place. Outside the windows, New York glittered like a circuit board, all light and energy and endless possibility. Somewhere in that maze of concrete and ambition, her grandmother was preparing for another day of teaching children who might not have a center to learn in. Much longer. The marriage was just the beginning. The real war would start tomorrow. The education of Mrs. Sterling began with a breakfast that could have fed a small village and a schedule that would have impressed a military general. Max appeared at her door at precisely 8 a.m., impeccably dressed and carrying a leather portfolio, thick enough to serve as body armor. "Today you'll learn how to be the wife of Maximilliano Sterling," he announced, setting the portfolio on the marble kitchen island. Etiquette lessons with Mrs. Pemberton at 9, wardrobe consultation with Stella Chen at 11, and lunch with the Sterling Corp board wives at 1. Camila looked down at her jeans and paint-stained sneakers, the same clothes she had worn. 2 community center protests for the past 3 years. "And if I refuse, then you'll attend tonight's charity gala looking exactly like you do now. Everyone will know that I married a woman who doesn't understand the game we're playing." His smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Your choice." Mrs. Pemberton turned. Out to be a steel-haired woman in her 70s who treated social graces like a general treated battle strategy. She corrected Camila's posture with a ruler, taught her which fork to use for each course of a 7-course meal, and explained the subtle art of insulting someone while appearing to compliment them. "The key, my dear, is to remember that everything is performance," Mrs. Pemberton explained while Camila practiced walking in heels that could double as weapons. "These people will smile at you while calculating your weaknesses. You must do the same to them, only better." Stella Chen, the wardrobe consultant, was a tiny woman with enormous presence who took one look at Camila's current outfit and actually shuddered. "We have 6 hours to perform a miracle," she muttered, pulling out her phone to make rapid-fire calls to designers whose names Camila recognized from magazine covers. The transformation was thorough and ruthless. Designer dresses that cost more than most people's cars, shoes handcrafted in Italy, jewelry that belonged in museum cases. Each item felt like armor, protection against a world that would judge her before she spoke a single word. But it was the lunch with the Sterling Corp board wives that truly opened Camila's eyes to the battlefield she had entered. These women were predators disguised as philanthropists, their smiles as sharp as their perfectly manicured nails. "So lovely to meet you, dear," cooed Patricia Blackwood, the wife of Sterling Corp's CFO. "We were all so surprised to hear about Max's sudden marriage. So romantic, the way you met." "Yes," added Vivian Cross, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Throwing rocks at cars is such an unconventional courtship method." They knew. Of course they knew. In their world, information was currency. And Camila's public humiliation of their golden boy had made her a target worth studying. "Sometimes, the direct approach is most effective," Camila replied, remembering Mrs. Pemberton's lessons about weaponizing politeness. "Max appreciated my honesty. It's refreshing, isn't it, when someone doesn't want anything from you except your attention?" The subtle barb hit its mark. These women had married for money, position, security. The suggestion that Camila's motives were pure enough to be dangerous made their perfectly applied makeup seem suddenly garish. The afternoon brought more lessons. In the art of being Mrs. Sterling, a private session with a media consultant who taught her how to deflect intrusive questions with grace, a meeting with Max's personal shopper to ensure her public appearances would photograph well, a crash course in the charitable causes that Sterling Corp supported, each one carefully chosen for maximum tax benefit and minimum actual impact. By evening, Camila felt like a different person entirely. The woman who stared back from the penthouse mirror wore a midnight blue gown that hugged every curve, diamond earrings that caught the light like captured stars, and an expression of cool confidence that had been painted on with expert precision. Max emerged from his office in a tuxedo that probably cost more than most people's cars, but stopped short when he saw her. The moment the mask of polished perfection slipped entirely, revealing something raw and almost vulnerable in his expression. "You look," he paused, as if searching for words in a language he didn't speak fluently, "stunning." I look expensive, Camila corrected. There's a difference. The charity gala was held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where New York's elite gathered to bid ridiculous amounts of money on art they would never appreciate and causes they would never truly support. Camila moved through the crowd on Max's arm, playing the role of devoted wife while mentally cataloging the wealth on display. That necklace could fund the community center for 5 years, she whispered to Max as they passed a woman dripping in emeralds. That woman's husband owns half the real estate in Midtown, he replied. Her necklace is a business expense. Everything's business to you, isn't it? Everything's business to everyone. Some people are just honest about it. They were interrupted by a commotion near the museum's grand staircase. A young woman, probably no older than 18, had somehow made it past security and was shouting at the assembled guests. You people spend more on a single dinner than my family sees in a year. There are children sleeping in cars while you drink champagne and pretend to care about charity. Security moved to escort her out, but something in the girl's voice, raw with desperation and fury, made Camila step forward.
Wait,
she called out, her voice carrying across the marble hall.
Ow.
Let her speak. The crowd turned to stare at Max's new wife, shock rippling through the assembly like stones thrown into still water. Max's hand tightened on her arm, a warning she chose to ignore. What's your name? Camila asked the girl. Sophia Martinez? And you're just like the rest of them, aren't you? It's plain dress up while the world burns? The accusation hit harder than a physical blow. Camila looked around at the sea of diamonds and silk, at faces that watched her with calculating interest. At her husband, whose expression had gone carefully blank. You're right, she said quietly, but in the acoustic perfection of the museum hall, everyone heard. We are playing dress up. The question is what we do when the costume party ends. She walked over to Sophia, ignoring the whispers that followed like an undertow. Tell me about your family. My mom works 3 jobs and still can't make rent. My little brother has asthma, but we can't afford his inhaler. The community center where he goes after school is getting torn down to build more luxury condos. Sophia's voice broke on the last words. Everything that helps people like us gets destroyed, so people like them can get richer. Camila felt the weight of every diamond, every silk thread, every perfectly applied stroke of makeup. She thought of her grandmother, of the children who needed safe places to learn and grow. Of all the Sophia Martinezes whose voices were drowned out by the sound of champagne glasses clinking. Come with me, she said, taking Sophia's arm. There's someone you need to meet. She led the girl directly to Max, whose jaw had tightened to the point where she wondered if it might crack. Max, this is Sophia Martinez. Sophia, this is my husband. He owns the company that's planning to demolish your brother's after-school program. The silence that followed was so complete that the sound of a cell phone camera clicking seemed as loud as gunfire. Max stared at Camila with something that might have been admiration, or might have been fury. Around them, New York's elite watched their golden boy face the human cost of his business empire. Mr. Sterling, Sophia said, her voice steadier now. Please don't take away the only safe place my brother has. Max looked from Sophia to Camila to the crowd of watching faces, all waiting to see how he would handle this public challenge to his authority. The next words out of his mouth would define not just his marriage, but the man he chose to be. The demolition is canceled, he said quietly, effective immediately. The gasps and whispers that erupted around them sounded like wind through broken glass. Max had just publicly reversed a multi-million-dollar decision because his wife of one day had asked him to. In their world, such displays of apparent weakness were blood in the water. You realize what you just did? James Morrison appeared at Max's elbow, his face pale with panic. The board will have questions. Lots of questions. Let them ask, Max replied, his eyes never leaving Camila's face. I'm sure my wife will have interesting answers. As they left the gala early, ignoring the stares and whispered conversations that followed in their wake, Camila realized that the real game was just beginning. She had thrown a stone at Max's car and shattered his windshield. Tonight she had thrown words at his world and cracked something much more important. The question was whether he would thank her or destroy her for it. The penthouse felt different when they returned from the gala, as if the air itself had shifted to accommodate new possibilities. Max loosened his bow tie and poured himself 3 fingers of scotch, his movements precise despite the tension radiating from his shoulders like heat from a forge. "The board will demand an emergency meeting," he said, without looking at her. "James is probably already calling them. By morning, there will be questions about my judgment, my fitness to lead the company, my ability to separate personal feelings from business decisions." Camila kicked off the designer heels that had been slowly murdering her feet for the past 6 hours. "And what will you tell them?" "I'll tell them that my wife helped me remember something I had forgotten." He turned to face her, and she saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. That buildings are just steel and concrete, but communities are made of people. That's a very expensive revelation. The most important ones usually are. He moved closer, and she caught that cedar scent again, now mixed with the phantom aroma of champagne and the electric tension that had been building between them all evening. "You could have destroyed me tonight. One word from you about why we really married, one hint about your father's ultimatum, and every vulture in that room would have circled for the kill. But I didn't know you didn't. Instead, you forced me to look at a scared girl and see my own sister at that age. When our father lost everything and we had nowhere to go except a community center in Queens, where volunteers taught us that poverty wasn't a character flaw. The admission hung between them like a bridge across a chasm she hadn't known existed. Max Sterling, heir to an empire, child of privilege and power, had once been exactly like Sophia Martinez. "You never told me that. I never tell anyone that. It's not part of the brand." His smile was rueful, almost self-mocking. "But you seem to specialize in making me do things I never do, like marrying women who throw rocks at your car, like caring what happens to people I'll never meet." He was close enough now that she could see the flecks of gold in his blue eyes. It was close enough to count the faint lines that appeared when he smiled without calculation or agenda. Close enough to kiss, if she wanted to cross that particular line. Camila. Her name sounded different in his voice now, less like a weapon and more like a prayer. "This year we agreed to, this arrangement we made. I don't think either of us understood what we were signing up for. Probably not." Her voice came out breathier than she intended. "Does that scare you?" "Terrifies me." His hand lifted to trace the line of her jaw, thumb brushing across her lower lip with devastating gentleness. "I've built my entire life around control, around knowing exactly what I want and how to get it. You make me want things I don't have. Names for." The kiss, when it came, tasted like scotch and possibility. Unlike their perfunctory exchange at the courthouse, this was a conversation conducted in the language of touch. A negotiation that left them both breathless and wanting more. When they broke apart, Max rested his forehead against hers, his breathing unsteady. "Stay with me tonight. Not in the guest room, not as part of our arrangement. Because you want to, Max? I know this is complicated. I know we started this as a business deal, and I know you have every reason not to trust me. But tonight, when you stood up for that girl, when you looked at me like I could be better than I am, I felt something I haven't felt in years." "What?" "Hope." The words settled between them like a seed in fertile ground. Camila thought of all the reasons she should say no, should maintain the careful boundaries they had established, should remember that this was temporary and transactional, and nothing more than an elaborate game of chess played with human hearts. Instead, she took his hand and led him toward the staircase. The master bedroom was exactly what she expected from Max Sterling. All clean lines and expensive minimalism. But the man who stood before her, removing his cufflinks, was someone entirely different from the arrogant heir who had emerged from that shattered Lamborghini. They came together like storm fronts colliding, desperate and hungry and surprisingly tender. He mapped every inch of her skin as if memorizing sacred text, whispered her name like an incantation against the darkness that had shaped him. She discovered that beneath the perfect suits and calculated smiles lived a man who trembled when she touched him, who gasped her name like she was salvation itself. Afterward, they lay tangled in sheets that probably cost more than most people's cars. Her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow back to human rhythms. "What happens now?" she asked, tracing lazy patterns on his skin. Now we figure out if we can build something real from the wreckage of our fake arrangement. His fingers combed through her hair, dark strands catching the city lights that filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, like the board meeting is. In 3 days, they'll try to force me out, claim I'm unfit to lead because I let emotion cloud my judgment. And are you unfit to lead? Max was quiet for so long she thought he had fallen asleep. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of years of carefully constructed defenses crumbling all at once. The man who built Sterling Corp was ruthless because he had to be, clawed his way up from nothing, and he never forgot what it felt like to be powerless. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that protecting what we built doesn't have to mean destroying everything else. So what will you tell the board? The truth. Sterling Corp is going to start building communities instead of just displacing them. That profit doesn't have to come at the expense of people's lives. That my wife opened my eyes to possibilities I had been too arrogant to see. He tilted her chin up so she could see his face in the dim light. If they don't like it, they can find a new CEO. You'd risk everything for a principal? I'd risk everything for you. The words were simple, unadorned by the practiced charm he used in boardrooms and social gatherings. These past few days, watching you navigate my world while refusing to lose yourself in it, seeing you stand up. For people who can't stand up for themselves, I realized something. What? I've been living someone else's life? Playing a role that was written for me before I was old enough to choose my own script? But when I'm with you, when I see myself, through your eyes I remember who I wanted to be, before the world taught me that wanting was weakness. Camila felt tears she hadn't expected prick at the corners of her eyes. Max, I love you. The confession fell between them like a bridge across an impossible divide. I know it's insane. I know we barely know each other. I know this started as the world's most complicated business transaction. But I love the way you challenge everything I thought I knew about myself. I love that you threw a rock at my car and somehow managed to shatter every wall I'd built around my heart. She kissed him then, soft and sweet, and full of promises neither of them had planned to make. I love you too, you impossible, arrogant, beautiful man. Even when you're making decisions that could destroy your entire empire. Our empire, he corrected, if you'll have it. If you'll have me. Not for a year, not as part of some arrangement our fathers cooked up, but forever. For real this time. The board meeting 3 days later made headlines in every business publication in the country. Max Sterling walked into the Sterling Corp. conference room with his wife at his side and announced that the company would be restructuring its entire approach to development. Community impact assessments would become standard. Low-income housing would be integrated into every luxury project. The community center on 47th Street would not only be saved but expanded. With Sterling Corp funding the renovations, half. The board walked out. Stock price dropped 12% in the first hour of trading. Financial analysts called it corporate suicide. 6 months later, Sterling Corp posted record profits as cities across the country competed to attract a development company that actually improved the neighborhoods it touched. The waiting list for Sterling apartments stretched for months, filled with people who wanted to live in buildings designed by architects who understood that luxury and community weren't mutually exclusive concepts. Camila kept her job at the community center, though she now arrived in a Lamborghini that had been modified with a special compartment for art supplies and protest signs. She and Max had become the most photographed couple in New York, not because of their wealth, but because of their willingness to use it in service of something larger than themselves. Any regrets? Max asked, on their first anniversary, as they stood on the balcony of their penthouse, watching the sun set over a city that looked different to both of them now. About throwing that rock? Camila smiled, leaning back against his chest. Not a single one. You. About marrying a woman who specializes in beautiful destruction? Max wrapped his arms around her, breathing in the cinnamon scent that had become his favorite perfume. Never. Below them, New York glittered with the light of 8 million dreams, as some of them now just a little more likely to come true. Because a woman had thrown a stone at exactly the right windshield and shattered exactly the right heart. In the distance, construction crews worked late into the evening on the new Ricardo Rodriguez Community Center. Its cornerstone inscribed with a simple message that would puzzle Future generations who had forgotten the story of how it came to be. Built. Some storms bring rain, others bring redemption. Asterisk subscribe for more epic love stories that will leave you breathless. Ain't.